Welcome to Aston Means Business. I'm Steve Dyson, the journalist presenting this regular podcast for Aston Business School, subtitled SMEs Building Resilience to COVID-19 Challenges. We're interviewing small business leaders who are taking part or who've recently taken part in Aston's Centre for Growth's programmes. They're sharing their experiences and explaining how they're developing their operations during these uncertain economic times. We're also talking to some of Aston Business School's top academics, getting their valuable insight, analysis and advice for SMEs. In today's episode, I'm interviewing James Morris. He's the Managing Director of Trafalgar Marquees, a temporary structure hire business based out of West Sussex. Pre-COVID, Trafalgar's big focus was on corporate hospitality, and the company initially experienced a 90% hit on revenues when the economy went into lockdown. But Trafalgar survived and is now growing again, supplying marquees for extra space needed at schools, in the construction industry, and even for the NHS, including COVID-19 testing centres. Here listening to my interview is Mark Hart, Professor of Small Business and Entrepreneurship at Aston Business School. Mark's also got some very useful news for businesses about Aston's part in a Help to Grow management programme, the funding of which was announced by Rishi Sunak in his recent budget. Hello again, Mark.
Good to be back with you again, Steve.
And you, Mark. We'll have a good chat once we've heard my interview with James Morris. Hello to you, James.
Hi, Steve.
James, tell us about how you started, how Trafalgar Marquees developed, and give us an idea of its size in terms of staff and revenues.
So I started the business back in 2007 when I was studying at Leeds University. I never really wanted to work for myself, but I thought it'd be a fun summer project to have and sort of have that experience of working for myself. One of our first was the opportunity to set up a marquee for a summer ball at a local private school, and that worked really well, and we carried on working from there, and they remained one of our clients, actually. After graduating, a few years later, I continued to grow it, and then in 2011, we acquired another business and then grew through acquisition and organically. Before COVID, the focus of the business was predominantly on hiring marquees out for major corporate events, summer parties, winter gatherings, etc. And a typical sort of look at the business would be turning around, just sort of over £1 million, and full-time staff of about 20, and then that would rise to over 35 during the summer kind of peak periods.
It sounds like a fun business, and we all enjoy a party under the marquee with the drinks flowing and tasty canapes. But I guess all that was really hit hard by COVID-19.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's a fun business, typically out in the summer. Everyone's having a good time. But yeah, the pandemic took us, by real surprise. I think we had an initial call from one of our German customers in February of last year, cancelling an event. And we sort of looked at each other in the office and we thought it was a bit mad and quite premature. But then, like dominoes, lockdown came and just cancellation sort of flooded in from there. And initially we lost about 90% of our revenue sort of pretty much overnight.
Goodness, 90% of your revenues, that sounds awful, especially because everything your business was about, providing spaces for people to meet in, was exactly what the last year has put on hold with everyone staying at home. What on earth could you do?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems bizarre that we had a business that relies on people gathering and meeting each other. When we talk now, we're lucky we already had quite a diverse portfolio of customers. So we already had quite a few customers in the construction industry. So we still continued to solve their problems just in a different way. So we had to really rethink our business and strip it down to its core, which is, we provide additional space to our clients. This time it wasn't for those big emotional occasions or big sort of summer corporate events. This time we were creating additional space for socially distanced canteens or temporary classrooms, etc. So that led us to developing a new brand for the business, Trafalgar Structures, and that was really more focusing on longer term hires. So like we said before, helping schools get back, to school and term time, and getting the construction industry back to work as well, and also helping the government with some of their infrastructure requirements.
Oh, that last part sounds a bit technical, the government's infrastructure requirements, James. Do you mean all the marquees for things like COVID testing and that sort of thing?
I can't go into too many details, as I'm sure you can imagine, in terms of that. But what I can say is we're really proud to help and supported where we can, and that includes, various structures for things like the NHS, COVID-19 testing, waiting rooms, etc.
Okay, fair enough. That's enough for us to know that you're at least helping with the testing around the pandemic. But this new work, from schools to government contracts, creating more space for the construction industry and others, that's enabled you to survive. Is that right?
It has indeed. Look, it's certainly not been easy, and it's certainly a long way from where we were over 12 months ago as a business. We're a very different business. We've had to really innovate new products, new markets, pivot the business, changing what we used to do to what we do now. But we just had to provide additional space. I mean, importantly, we've kept the core team. Ultimately, there is no business, all about the people in the business. And furlough has been a huge, huge help, and a couple of other government support schemes. And we're lucky we've managed to create that sort of excitement back in the business, almost thinking like a startup again, and having everyone adopt that growth mindset and looking into new products and new markets we can evolve and innovate into. What I've certainly realized is as we've grown, the business was bigger. We're not huge, but it became a bit like an oil tanker to turn around. So kind of stripping it back, thinking like a startup again, getting the team really engaged and involved in changing how we do. It's also meant unlearning a lot of things, which can be tough at times. But it's been really exciting connecting with customers and helping support them in new different ways. It's getting us back on that track to set up to grow back again and look at other areas of growth.
And how have you managed to change so quickly? And does the business have a long-term future in the new world that's now ahead of us?
Certainly, this is where the Small Business Leadership Programme at Aston and Professor Mark Hart has really helped us reinforce that mindset of need to change and constantly evolving. So in many ways, I think of ourselves as quite a traditional business, asset heavy, very people heavy. We have a big warehouse and vehicles, etc. We're not like, many of these other sort of new growth businesses you see, but Aston really gave us the insight and the tools to operate and continue operating in a modern way, and also really putting innovation at the heart of what we do, keeping it really live business, but also tearing up the way we used to do things and putting it back together and improving things, doing some things in new and fun ways. I wouldn't say change completely. I'd perhaps say, more refocused. And the future for us in live events depends on so many things, including confidence. We've already seen Glastonbury not happening this year. So, will customers be confident to come back and mingle like they used to? So we need to look at other new revenue streams. And as I said, just stripping back to the business to what we do, which is create additional space and see how else we can support our clients, innovate new products and innovate into new markets.
And what kind of return to revenues have you seen in the last few months?
So we're not back at 100%, and I think far from it, but we're now trading at around sort of 44% of pre-COVID levels, and we're expecting to be back at around 50%, which, I'm sure things will change again, but considering the current marketplace, we're pretty happy with that.
I guess in your mind is the fact that people will always need spaces.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I think now more so than ever, because of measures like social distancing, etc., space is becoming more key than ever before.
And one last question, James. Although your revenues are only sort of approaching half of what they were, it's pretty impressive that you've been able to keep all your full-time staff on. Do you see that continuing, and do you see any further growth in your staffing as time goes on?
Yeah, it's clearly been a challenge trying to keep that core team on, but I'm really proud we've kept our core team together. Absolutely, see keeping that team going forward, and we do have plans to grow as and when that happens. It's just a question of navigating what lies ahead.
James Morris, Managing Director of Trafalgar Marquees, many thanks for joining us, and I really hope your business continues on what sounds like a really healthy road to recovery.
Thanks very much, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Hopefully still with me is Mark Hart, Professor of Small Business and Entrepreneurship at Aston Business School. Are you still there, Mark?
I am indeed. It was a fascinating interview you had there with James.
Indeed it was. I mean, to cut a long story short, Trafalgar had to switch from main events like summer parties and corporate hospitality to providing extra space for schools, industry, and even the NHS because of COVID-19. It was an impressive turnaround by James, wasn't it?
It was, and I think if you spend a lot of time with James, as I actually have done, he's a very impressive individual. It was just actually by accident that I tend to tweet a lot about the work we do at Aston and more generally about SME issues in the UK. And he responded to a tweet. We were launching the Small Business Leadership Programme last summer, which was a BASE programme, which Paul Scully, the Small Business Minister, launched in August. And I was tweeting a lot about that at the time, and he followed up with me. And actually, in the midst of, I was going to say annual leave, but I don't think anybody had annual leave last year. It was more like lockdown, doing something different, I think. But we had a long chat, and it suddenly dawned on me that James was a very extraordinary individual in the sense that very open to challenge, very open to a critique of his business model, and that's where it all started last summer, having a chat in my garden
Wow.
in the middle of August.
I mean, James admitted to me in the interview that this wasn't simple. As we heard, his initial revenue hit was 90%. And faced with that, many businesses would just go under. It must have taken some determination and leadership to still be here.
Well, this is what he reached out to me. He said, look, what can I do? And I basically said, okay, the other opportunities will present themselves. You've got to make sure that you and the rest of your company are on board with this, and you'll be grabbing at every opportunity as possible. But talking to, look, this was the month of Eat Out to Help Out. So in many senses, the people were thinking that, well, the worst is past. If only we had known, and therefore he was thinking about, well, look, my corporate clients haven't rushed back to me yet, but what else can I be doing? So we got James on the program, before the end of the calendar year, and we worked with him. But one of the big things that James was really working on was innovation. That's what drives him, and thinking about how well he can respond to other opportunities. And obviously there's a lot of contracting going on. He's obviously got contracts, keeping them very close to his chest, I think, but nevertheless it's clear that he has found clients, public sector, in the last few months of 2020, and that's continued into 21. So I think the issue for me was, how do we get James, his curious mindset of thinking about his business model, deconstructing it, put it back together again. And at the end of the day, it still is Marquees on the back of trucks and lorries going to individual places. The business hasn't changed, but nevertheless, he's managed to keep it going, and I'm very impressed with him getting back up to about 500,000 turnover again.
I know. I mean, it's just him being able to find new customers for the same product. The product is still providing space, but all his custom went, or a lot of it at any rate. And it's just finding those new customers, isn't it? That was his big challenge. It
is the big challenge, and it's not just about James. I mean, it's about the team around him as well, who actually realised that, okay, look, there's many reactions I've seen in many small businesses last year. Those who just say, oh, well, there's nothing that can be done, and those that have said, okay, let's think about what else I can do, and building on the skills that they've built up in the business in themselves, their management team, and every one of their employees. And I think in this series of podcasts, we've seen numerous examples of the key founder of the business being the key driver, but nevertheless bringing the employees along with them was very key. And I think that's very important with James as well. But obviously, we taught him some skills. Let's be clear. The Small Business Leadership Programme, which we ran at Aston and indeed across 20 other business schools in England, was instrumental in helping nearly 2,500 small businesses at a very crucial time in Q4 of 2020 to, give them the skills to cope with another third national lockdown, which is what we're currently easing our way out of.
James indeed was very complimentary about the Small Business Leadership Programme. And for listeners who know little about this, Mark, I want to get you to talk to us about what's covered in the programme that can assist business leaders faced with such extreme crises.
Well, I think the first thing to say, Steve, is the Small Business Leadership Programme will be coming to an end in the end of the first quarter 2021, and it will be replaced. I'll come back to the content in a moment. It will be replaced by Help to Grow Management, which was announced in the 3rd of March budget by the Chancellor, which is a very ambitious programme of giving business schools who've got the Small Business Charter accreditation, like Aston Business School, and it will be across the UK, not just confined to England. And again, it's a management, leadership and training program to upskill the workforce, because we know that's crucial for growth, productivity, innovation, et cetera, et cetera. So it is being replaced by an even better scheme. So that's the first point to note for the listeners. But if we come back to SBLP and Help to Grow Management, the principles are the same. What we're looking at here is finances, operations, marketing and sales, leadership, employee engagement, building a high-performance workplace, and some of the core themes are about innovation, internationalization, looking at the way in which you can continually evolve your business model and respond to challenges, making it more resilient. Also, the whole issue about sustainability. We cannot let COVID crisis take our eye off the ball about net zero targets and thinking about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These are crucial. So I think there's a great opportunity, as hopefully sometime this year we come out of the crisis, we can get our businesses thinking more clearly and about those wider social and environmental impacts, as well as the bottom line. The other thing, of course, is that this Help to Grow management program is of immense scale. 30,000 businesses will go through this program by 2024. So I think the government's putting its money into the sort of programs that Aston and our other business schools have been running for many, many years. And I'm actually welcoming the investment that government is making. I think will be a tremendous boost to not just the economy, but to many regions and also the devolved administrations and nations of the UK. Within 24 hours of the Chancellor announcing this, there was nearly 4,000 expressions of interest. So this is in huge demand. It will start virtually because obviously the current COVID restrictions, but hopefully we'll be able to get every business owner onto the campus of the participating universities. And just to say, it's also true that those who graduated, like James, from the Small Business Leadership Programme, they will be part of this alumni of the programme as we get waves of businesses going through the programme. So that wasn't just a 6-9 month programme and they're all forgotten about. They'll join with the new Help to Grow management graduates as well. So we're looking forward to build a large scale community of growth oriented business owners like James. And if they're all like James and we can help them along the way, then I think we have got a great lever to pull to help the economy rebound back to where it was prior to the pandemic.
That sounds really useful. One last question for you, Mark. I'm just thinking now of a business leader who might be out there listening. His revenues or her revenues have been hugely damaged by the pandemic and lockdown. Just in terms of their first stages, before they go on any such program, what are your top tips for someone in that position? What should they do next when things have just gone bump in the night? Cash flow.
And it's also about making sure that you do not sort of bury your head in the sand. Talk to your team if you have one. Some people don't have it. It's a very lonely existence and they just have a few employees or contractors or freelancers. I think it's important that you keep an eye on your cash. I mean, that's the most important message I can give. But also don't be afraid to go back and look at the business model you went into the market with. Is it still fit for purpose? And I would urge you to be critical of what you set your business up to do. And the phrase I use, lift the bonnet, look at the engine, and maybe, put a twin carburetor in as opposed to, a simple 2-stroke. So I think it's important to review your business model, but keep an eye on the cash. Everyone should have a 13-week rolling cash flow forecast, and they should look at it on a regular basis. That means that you know exactly where you stand when things go bump.
Mark Hart, Professor of Small Business and Entrepreneurship at Aston Business School. Thanks again for joining us today and for listening to James Morris's story and guiding listeners on those top learning points to take away.
Absolute pleasure, Steve. Talk to you soon.
Any business leaders interested in the Help to Grow Management Programme can find out more by logging on to www.smallbusinesscharter.org. We'll be back soon with another case study on how SMEs are recovering and even growing during the pandemic, with more crucial analysis and advice from academics and experts here at Aston. Aston means business. SMEs building resilience to COVID-19 challenges. Thanks for listening.